Welcome to the Brainz Magazine podcast, a podcast with in-depth interviews and conversations with world-class entrepreneurs, expert coaches, industry leaders, and international celebrities. Get exclusive insight into the world of business, mindset, leadership, and lifestyle with your host, Mark Sefton.
I want to welcome you to the next episode of the Brainz Magazine podcast. And today we have Julija Lemanaite. Julija is a time management coach. She helps females manage stress and up-level productivity. She's also the graduate of the Nurse Coach Collective program. Awesome stuff, Julija. How are you?
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here. Thank you, Mark. Thank you to Brainz Magazine. This is my first podcast, so I'm super ready to dive in.
Yeah, so that's exciting for me as well. I've enjoyed the fact there has been a couple of people over the couple of years that I've been hosting the podcast that it's been their first time, and typically they've thoroughly enjoyed it. And then I've seen them like popping up on so many different podcasts since then. So I'm sure you're going to end up with the bug, don't you think, Julie? You're going to be really chomping at the bit to do podcasts all the time.
Yes, that's the dream.
I wanted to ask you from the get-go. What is nurse coaching? Like when I came across this, I was like, well, this is different. I can't say that I've ever come across or certainly haven't interviewed somebody that's involved in nurse coaching. Like, what is it?
Sure, absolutely. So, as many of you know, coaching is a very widespread field. A lot of people are coaches nowadays, especially with, the age of the internet. But what differentiates nurse coaching and makes it so special is those that are nurse coaches have a background in nursing. So we're registered nurses, we have bachelor degrees in nursing, and we are a board accredited certified field. So the AHNA, the American Holistic Nurses Association, made this the first accredited certification in Western medical history. So it's super exciting, super new. So having that background in nursing, right, makes coaches just a lot more credible because we have so much experience at the bedside, dealing with different types of situations, different age ranges of patients, different races, nationalities. Like we have seen it all. And having that background, right, working with so many different types of people just really makes nurse coaches stand out because of that.
Mm.
So as a coach, we're educators. There's a lot of ways to practice as a nurse coach. So the way that I chose to practice was I opened up my own LLC and I have a private practice from home. But there's a lot of nurse coaches doing amazing things. I know a lot of nurse coaches that have created jobs within their hospital system. I know a couple of nurse coaches that work within hospital systems to help with education, help with, like diabetes management, that help with, for labor and delivery, that help with like post-care of having a newborn. There's a lot of moms out there that, don't have support at home. So a lot of nurse coaches use their certification to help moms again, with their babies and kind of like, follow them around, keep them accountable, support them. A lot of the times, in the hospital, you only have X amount of time, right, to connect with a patient, to be able to support them. And so when they leave the hospital, it's kind of like you never see them again, right? But as a coach, you get to pick, especially if you work in a hospital, like you get to continue that relationship with that patient, guide them through their journey, again, be their accountability and support system. In my case, I get to choose in my program, how long I want to work with somebody. And it's just amazing, again, because in a hospital, you don't have a lot of time to have this deep one-on-one connection with the patients that you serve.
Lovely. So I would love to know, like, how does this story all unravel? You go in from a level 1 trauma nurse to transition into a time management coach. What was the transition there? Obviously, we see people have transferable skills, and there's a journey behind it. I'd love to know how this kind of links for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, I got burned out pretty quick as a nurse. So I do work in a level 1 trauma hospital, and I started during the COVID pandemic. So to me, as a baby nurse, starting in such an intense time of life, right? And a time where a lot of nurses were just completely burnt out as well. Their retention rates were high. There was a lot of issues with understaffing, and obviously people were really, really sick. People were passing away faster than we have ever seen before in the medical system. And so me kind of being introduced to the Western medical world in that way really was jarring. And so I burnt out pretty quick after about a year of working full time. I switched to like a part-time position. And in the back of my mind, I was just thinking like I had just an intuition, like a gut feeling. I am not meant to stay here. Like this is going to be my foundation, my stepping stone, but I don't want to be a bedside nurse forever. And really what was kind of like the main thing with that was, again, like I wanted to be able to connect one-on-one with my patients. I felt so sad going home every day being like, wow, like I wish I could have talked to Mrs. XYZ for longer. And I wish that I could have told her this, and this. And, I wish there was time in my day where I could have talked to her more about, her diet. And I wish I could have talked to her more about, managing her time with this new autoimmune condition she was diagnosed with, just so many different things. And as nurses, we're taught to really just kind of suppress a lot of things, right? So, if somebody passes away, we still got to work. We get maybe a couple minutes of a break, and then we have to body bag, and then we have to go on to the next patient. So there's not a lot of room for, being really a human. And to me, nursing is a very human-based field. Like the connection that you have with people, like that is what I chased nursing for. That's why I even went to nursing school. So me being also somebody who has always been just naturally more on the holistic end, always just wanting to view my patients, right, as a whole picture, not just as a number, a diagnosis, and, treating them from that end. I would always be Googling, like during work, anytime I'd be done charting, I would just be on Google, like, what are alternative nursing fields? What are holistic nursing jobs? How can I get out of a hospital setting? And the first thing that I found was the Nurse Coach Collective. And I was like, what is this? So dove into it, read all about it. And then every single bullet point on that website, it was me, like to the T. I felt like it was made for me. Like I said, I had this intuition and calling from God, like, this is what I need to do. So I instantly applied for the program, got into that, graduated, sat for the boards, got, again, board accredited and certified to be a nurse coach. And then when I started my LLC last year, because I also really wanted to be a business owner, that's also something that has been a gut calling of mine for a very long time since I was a teenager. I realized, okay, I need to pick a niche. Like I can't just call myself a health and wellness coach, a life coach. That's too broad. I really want to narrow it down. And I always knew I wanted to help women. That was like my main thing, because I think that women supporting women in this society is super powerful. Women in medicine are not always treated as equal to men. Even nowadays, it's very sad. But women are often underrepresented. So I wanted to be that representation. I had a lot of experience being an advocate for my female patients. I had a lot of experience, again, with bedside rapport and just, really learning to connect with all ages and walks of life. So I thought it'd be so perfect if I served a female community. And the reason that I picked time management, which is kind of like a niche, right? And it's kind of interesting and different, especially going from what I was once working in as a level 1 trauma nurse, is because I have a firm belief that if you have the power of your time, which we all do, and we can realize that power, and we realize that we do have control of how we can navigate our life, the things that we do, how we occupy our day, the goals that we have, we can become unstoppable. And again, especially because as women, we sometimes forget the power that we have. And I think that for me, it was just like a no-brainer. I'm going to serve women, and I'm going to serve women to be able to take control of their time. Because again, if you can take control of your time and harness that, your whole life can change, and you feel this like amazing sense of accomplishment, and you just feel like, wow, like this is me. I can do this. I can do what I want with my life. I can shape it the way I want, and I don't have to fall into some standard box, and I don't have to work a standard job if I don't want to. And so a lot of things I highlight too is just like how to increase time freedom and live a really enjoyable life.
Love that. And it's clear that you've been on a journey yourself, and then it kind of opens up how you also want to help other people on their journey. I'm going to ask you about some of the time management things as well, because I think that's where a lot of your value and expertise come from, and I think it'd be helpful to tap into some of that. But before we do that, Julia, I'd love to know what is your favorite story about your own journey. So we all go through things in life. Obviously, you were a trauma nurse during COVID, and blimey, it's like that time for the whole health system was so intense and stressful. Like you guys were maxed. So it's kind of no wonder that you had that like revelation of, man, I don't want to be doing this for so long. And then that took you on a path. But when you consider your own personal journey, so I'm not just tying it to what you're doing now, but when you consider your whole journey since you were born, what has been your favorite story that's had you front and center of it?
Yeah. Oh man, favorite story. So I would say, oh, yeah. Is it okay if the story doesn't have to do just with me? It has to do with somebody else?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So honestly, my favorite like story is just being able to have like really powerful conversations with my mom about her journey of like immigration, of our family coming here, and just really being able to connect with my mom on this really deep level. Because I think as a first generation immigrant, I was born in Lithuania and I was raised here, right? So I never really got the chance to experience my own culture firsthand and see what my parents went through to bring us here. And so one of my favorite stories is just like, one night, just me and my mom, like just full blown, just like experiencing kind of like I was experiencing her life with her, almost like blast from the past. And it gave me this really great, amazing sense of just like, oh my gosh, I have so much gratitude for my family. I realize where my work ethic has come from, right? So like when my mom was sharing, like, they had to sell every single thing that they owned and they had to, they had to give up all of their friends and family that they knew. They had to give up the language that they grew up in. Just everything, the culture was a complete shock to both my mom and my dad. And especially for my mom to just, navigate this essentially, on her own, just with my dad, like it was so inspiring for me. And I think that once I realized like where I came from and how hard my parents worked, right? And I was able to connect with my mom on this really deep level that I feel like a lot of my teenage and childhood life I didn't get to have with her. It changed a lot of things for me. And I think that too, I think that's where kind of this entrepreneurial mindset came from me too, is because I have seen hustle, I have seen my parents work everything that they had just to provide, just to, to adapt to this culture, to be in America. And I know what it's like to have nothing and to have everything. And so, yeah, I felt really, just really moved by connecting with my mom on such a deep level. And I think that ever since that day, it just continued to propel me to have this immense amount of energy to continue doing the work I do, to continue, this opportunity. And I'm also a first generation business owner. Like nobody in my bloodline and my generation has ever done this type of work. And so I felt more honored and more pride that I could do this, that this is an amazing step for my generation and that I could leave an amazing legacy behind and take all of the amazing things that I've learned from my parents and again, their work ethic and just how they navigate the world and kind of bleed that into my own practice. And I've always felt like I was meant to do, again, something bigger. And I knew it had to be, related to, again, I've always felt called to help women, empower women. I always knew I wanted to start a business. So it was, again, a perfect match when I saw nurse coaches could be educators. You could have your own business with it, and that it would be a gateway ticket to have a lot of credibility to be able to change people's lives.
Mm. Yeah, I find it really interesting because whenever I think of time management, for me, I always look at it as energy management, and yeah, I'm never late, and I always have time for the things that I love. So I think in some ways, sometimes it's how we look at it, but it's something that's very clear. Is self-awareness is so helpful when it comes to time management or energy management, and it's clear that you have been on a journey all the way through, which makes you reflect on what it is that you want to do, what it is you don't want to do. And then I think, is time management as much about actually being aligned to yourself and having your own self-awareness, then having and making time for the things that really matter? Because if you're only doing the things that really matter and that are aligned to you, I always find that it's much easier to be able to manage that, right?
Yeah, yeah, you make a really good point. So that's a lot of the work that I do too, is actually a lot of mindset work and just like where is your time going, right? So we all have time, we all have the same amount of time every single day, but where are we prioritizing it? And exactly like you said, where are you harnessing your energy? And I totally believe that, because think about little kids. They have all the time in the world, right? And what do? They're creative, they color, they want to play, they harness their energy where they feel most aligned, where they want to explore. But as adults, we start to, well, most of us start to just like stop that, right? We stop exploring, we stop doing the things we love, we stop, harnessing our energy in areas that we have interest in, we stop being creative. So I totally agree with you in that aspect. And again, I think that, yeah, when you have a really aligned path and you know what it is, you have a clear vision of where you want to be, time management does become a lot easier. So a lot of the mindset work that I do with my clients is like, hey, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? Let's start building towards that future self, right? That you in 5 years that already exists in some dimension, right? And let's just start taking action steps to get you there. So I do agree that if you have a clear, like driven goal, if you have a clear purpose for your life and you feel really empowered and called to do something, then naturally you can start to pick out like, okay, what do I want to spend my time doing? What do I want to spend my time not doing? And you can see like, okay, is this going to help me get towards my future self? Or these building blocks that will help me get to where I want to be? Or is this going to deter me from my path for, again, my vision, my long-term goal?
Mm. Great. I'm going to ask you some questions now that I really kind of want to get into some of your expertise. How are you helping people go from busy to productive? Because we know that they're very different. Like a fool can be busy, it doesn't mean that they're actually getting anywhere. But how are you helping people transition from busy to productive?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. The two words have very different energies and meanings. And, a lot of the times we can be busy bees, right? But then still feel like we get nothing done. So I think the first thing that I really like to, harness and highlight is, where does your focus go? So, for example, what I mean by focus is there's a lot of CEOs, right, of companies. I've done a lot of extensive research on this, that they work 4 hours a day, right? And so thinking about, a lot of people work 12, 13, 14-hour days in their jobs, and they might get a lot less done than somebody that is a CEO, works for themselves, and gets a lot of done or work done in 4 hours, right? And so what's the difference between the person that's working a 12, 13-hour shift and the person that works for themselves for 4 hours? It's where they're focus goes, right? And how aligned they are with the work they do. So if you're working your own business and you have 4 hours of really dedicated work, you shut the phone out, you limit distractions, and you have a clear task in mind, you have a really nice setup, you have your to-do list, you have a big vision in mind for what you're doing, and you're motivated by your own vision to get yourself there. Again, the work becomes a lot more productive and just, again, naturally becomes a lot easier. Versus, and, no shame to anybody that isn't a business owner. I don't mean to say this at all, but again, if you're working, 3, 4 days a week, 12 plus hours, and you don't actually love the work that you do, then on your days off, you might feel really like unproductive, right? Because you're just so tired. You've poured all your energy into something that you maybe don't care about, right? And then any time you do have left, it might just feel really overwhelming. Again, your energy's not there. So I like to harness on the power of focus. Where can you really focus your time? It's a lot better and good for your time management to just get, let's say, 2 hours of work done a day towards your goal than 5 hours of, this and this back and forth. I'm kind of doing my work, I'm kind of not doing my work. So I think that that's super key. And again, when I listen to these podcasts and I try to learn more and inspire myself to do better, and so that I can be a better coach for my clients, this is like the main thing I see is the art of focus. And I think if you can master that, you can master your time as well.
Okay, so when you're talking about like the power of focus, you mentioned about like turning off your phone and kind of having your to-do list. Is there anything else that you really feel is really critical when it comes to focus? Because often, most people can't focus beyond like 20 minutes before they're getting like itchy.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of things within that. Firstly, I'd like to highlight, for a lot of people, there, especially nowadays in society, a lot of people struggle with like ADHD. And so I like to be really mindful of that when I work with my clients as well. And when I'm trying to do more education around time management, because I think that if we think about like ADHD and where the mind wanders and kind of like the brain processes, you have to work at it from a different approach. So for example, a great example with ADHD is I like to do time audits with my clients. So what a time audit is where you take one piece of paper and you write out all the tasks you have to do for the day, your to-do list, right? And then you write down how long you think those tasks are going to take before you start completing them. And then when you're actually doing the tasks, you're doing them with a timer, and you get to prove to yourself, okay, I thought this would take, let's say I thought this would take 4 hours. It actually only took me 1 hour. And so a lot of the times our brains go into this like shutdown mode. And again, those that struggle with ADHD, especially where they think that, okay, like this is going to take 10 times longer or 10 times shorter. And the brain becomes really confused. Like, oh, I thought this would be a more overwhelming task, but it's actually not. And when you can see those numbers side to side, it makes a really big difference. So I think that that's one of like my key ways when I work with people who have ADHD and helping with their focus and just kind of showing them like, hey, these are like the real numbers. This is actually like, this is actually like a really good way for you to manage your time, right? To see how long things actually take versus how much you think they would feel. It's more of a sensory issue than an issue of time. But for those, for those that don't struggle with ADHD and don't have different, deficits for memory and stuff like that, I think that a really powerful tool is just like batching tasks to be more productive. So what I mean with this is, again, you have your to-do list, whatever. I always say to-do list is like the staple. That's where we start. And then from there, we can get really creative and fun. So batching tasks looks like, grouping together things that can all be done in one sitting, right? So if you have, chores, that could be batched into one task. If you have emails and kind of more technical things, that can go in one task, in one batch of your, your planner, your digital planner, whatever that looks like for you, however you want to organize that. And I think that batching really makes you productive, because if you can batch out your tasks and group them all together instead of separately doing these each individual mini things that could be, again, save your time and group together, that does increase productivity. And it's proven to increase productivity because if we can group things together, it's less overwhelming, it's less overstimulating to the brain. We can just, attack something for what it is, get that done, again, take a mini break and keep going. And that's another thing that I really highlight is, you can't multitask as much as we want to, as much as we live in an age where we want to be on our phones and we also want to watch TV and we also want to be cooking and stuff like that. You never really get the most productivity out of that. You can try, and I've multitasked before and gotten work half done, but you are not as productive as with sheer focus onto one task. So really highlighting, giving yourself enough breaks in between, right? In between each individual focused set of whatever task you're doing, I think is really, really key, because the brain operates the best when you give it a little bit of rest and keep going. There's a method called the Pomodoro method. I learned about this technique actually in childhood in music school. So it was a way to practice, and I actually use it nowadays for my time management clients, just, in everyday life. So essentially what we do with the Pomodoro technique is you set a timer, and I'm a big fan about timers. I think timers are excellent in time management and productivity. And let's say, you want to do really dedicated focused work, not multitasking, one task from your batch, let's say for 20 minutes, right? Once that 20-minute timer is up, it doesn't matter where you are on your task. Then we're going to change the timer to 10 minutes, and we're going to have 10 minutes of uninterrupted break. This could mean going on a walk. This could mean listening to music, maybe taking a little power nap. And then once that 10 minutes is up, you go back into your task, and then you can slowly increase over time. So you could go 25 minutes with a 15-minute break. And this is a really awesome, effective, proven way, again, to really be productive, to harness the most of your time, and to not make it so jarring, right, to the brain to be like, okay, I have 5 hours of work and I'm not giving myself any time to just like breathe, right? You can't get a lot done. And I've tried it. Again, I've tried all of these things. I've tried to problem solve my own problems so that when I coach my clients, I know what I'm talking about, and it's never worked for me and it's never worked for anybody else. So Yeah, and giving yourself some rest is staple, super key.
Mm. Why is pen and paper so useful when we feel overwhelmed?
Yeah, I think pen and paper is, I mean, I love pen and paper. It's the king. And I think it's so amazing because it legitimizes things, right? We become credible to ourselves and we become accountable to ourselves when we write things down. So I know for me personally, if I don't have something written down, I mean, number one, I'm going to forget it. But number two, it puts it out there to the world, to me energetically, that this is something that is of value, is of priority. And when something is a priority, you're more likely to accomplish it. And I think just that visual simulation, write your own handwriting, there's a big power in, just repetition and writing and just the power of your own words being reflected upon you. It becomes a more credible thing to yourself to have pen and paper.
Definitely. Yeah, when I saw that, I was like, yeah, I really want to explore that with you because for me, it's like I love to journal. Even now, like I take notes because it really helps just bring back that intentionality. And obviously, you also have that reference point of going back to it, don't you? Which is obviously really important. When something is complex, Julia, how do we get clarity when there's so much going on? Like, how do you navigate that situation?
Like when there's a lot of tasks to do, or what do you mean by that?
Yeah, when there's a lot of tasks, when things feel a bit overwhelming, it's like how do we get clarity and actually start to move through some of that heaviness?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that one of the best things that you can do, and I teach this with my one-on-one clients, is to ground yourself, to have some sort of way to, again, put down the pen and paper as much as we love it and just really take a step and remember your why. So I always say remembering your why. So what I mean by that, when we become overwhelmed, sometimes we forget why we are doing the things we are, right? And I think that grounding yourself, taking a moment to meditate, to take a couple of deep breaths, to really sit with yourself and ask yourself, hey, why, for example, I don't know, let's say you're in school to be a teacher or something like that, and you're overwhelmed with projects and homework and stuff like that, essays. You can think about like, hey, I'm doing this to build my foundation blocks so I could have the career that I love, the job that I'm working so hard for. And yes, it's overwhelming now, but I will get there. Like I'm going to take things one step at a time. I think that having almost like a little pep talk with yourself, again, and grounding is really, really key. So a lot of us are running around in this world and we don't take any time to ground. We don't take any time to just take a deep breath. And I think the power of your own breath is the most powerful one of all. We don't have to pay anyone for it. It's with us all the time. And it's an available free tool, right? To de-stress, to kind of decompress and just like take a second to, again, harness yourself and, conserve your energy and just think like, okay, is it going to kill me if I don't do this thing right now? And if it doesn't, put it off for a couple of hours, put it off for a day. I think we all think that we need to be super mega productive every single day. And that can also be extremely toxic, right? So when we were talking about productivity versus busyness, both ends can be very toxic if we take it too far. And so I think that, again, think about if I don't do this task today, will it be the end of me or can I put this off for a little bit? And that's not saying that you're a lazy person. That's just like you being a human being. So I think being really honest with yourself, being really kind to your body and getting in some good grounding. My biggest proponent with grounding is meditation, but for a lot of people, meditation is not really their thing. So maybe it's going on a walk. Maybe it's literally just breathing in some fresh air, being in the sunlight for a little bit, listening to music that calms your nervous system. Our nervous system can become very overwhelmed when we have a lot of things to do, right? Our nervous system will be on fire. We start to have anxiety. Our heart rate increases. Anything we can do to slow down that nervous system is going to help us be able to see things clearly instead of see it, all wishy-washy and get, just really freaked out and overwhelmed by our own things that we have to do.
Very good. I love what you said about the power of your own breath. Like that really stood out like to me because obviously we all can apply that experience to ourselves since we all are breathing and we all have a body, so we're all able to bring it back to ourselves. And as you said, talked about grounding, which I think is really important when we feel overwhelmed. As we bring this into land, Julia, is there anything that you just feel intuitively that you may want to share before you let people know how they can find out more about you and how they can connect?
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say to all of my listeners that are women or, female identifying, I just want to tell all of you guys, like, you are amazing and you have so much power, and I believe in you. And I think that, again, as women, we live in this society where we feel like we are not sometimes as equal or that we can't harness our power. But I really want to remind you guys, and especially on this lovely platform, that you do have all of the power and that you are unstoppable, and that, where your attention goes and your mind and focus goes, like, that's where life will take you. So the more that you can develop a really strong mindset, have disciplined habits, and have a really solid foundation of, again, grounding and really taking care of yourself, mind, body, soul, you can achieve anything you want in this life. Nothing is of limitation to you. And it's really just in your own perspective and your own mind. If you feel like you have any self-limiting beliefs, you can work around that. And there are plenty of tools, even aside from coaching, and you can really just develop and harness yourself in the ways that you want.
Amazing. Really good. And how do people find out more about you then, Julia, and your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys can follow me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is all lowercase at Nurse Coach Julia. And you can read more about, different tips and tricks that I have on there. I always have free education and content on there if you just even want to browse and see, like, just some little things. And another way to contact me as well is just via my email if you just want to start a conversation, if you have any questions for me. And then through my website, you can go ahead and schedule a clarity call, as I call it. A clarity call, the purpose of that is just for, us to connect, to get to know you, to get to know kind of where your vision is, where your long-term goals stand, maybe what's standing in the way right now, and just like work through that. Those calls are always free. And after that, if you're interested in working with me, then we can talk more about logistics then. But I do offer that clarity call from my heart, just so everybody can experience coaching. It is a gift. A lot of people have never had a coach before, so I think it's very important to at least experience it before, investing into something like a coach.
Amazing. Well, thank you for joining me on today's episode of the Brainz Magazine podcast.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you for joining this episode with me, Mark Sefton. I hope you've really enjoyed it. Feel free to leave us a positive review on iTunes, and I look forward to welcoming you back to the next episode of the Brainz Magazine podcast.